I never thought I'd say this, but today I discovered my mother was right all along. Of course, I only figured this out after 3 years of marriage, 2 epic fights, 1 incident involving a wedding cake thrown at the wall, and approximately 547 cups of coffee shared in awkward silences. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Tuesday morning breakfast at the Pemberton household had always been a production worthy of Broadway, except nobody ever knew what the script would be. Scarlett Pemberton, 24 years old, with hair as fiery red as her temper, was chewing her French toast when her mother, Vivian, came down the stairs wearing that smile that always foreshadowed disasters. "Darling," Vivian began, adjusting her reading glasses that cost more than an economy car, "I have wonderful news." Scarlett nearly choked. Wonderful news from her mother usually involved expensive house renovations, questionable art purchases, or worse yet, matchmaking attempts. "Please tell me you didn't buy another horse." Scarlett sighed, remembering the traumatic episode with Princess Buttercup, the mare who hated everyone except the gardener. "Better than that!" Vivian was practically vibrating with excitement. "You're getting married!" The French toast stopped halfway to Scarlett's mouth. "I'm what?" "Getting married. To Alexander Blackwood." The name dropped into the kitchen air like a nuclear bomb. Alexander Blackwood, the business magnate who collected companies like other people collected stamps. The man who, according to gossip, had a heart colder than an iceberg and the charm of a hungry shark. "Mother," Scarlett said slowly, placing her toast on the plate, "did you hit your head coming down the stairs?" "Don't be dramatic, dear. It's an excellent deal for everyone involved." "A deal? Mother, we're talking about marriage, not a corporate merger." Vivian waved her hand, dismissing the objection like an inconvenient fly. "Sometimes it's the same thing. Listen, the Blackwoods need our social connections and family history for some, let's call them international ventures. We need their financial stability. It's perfect. Perfect would be if I had any voice in this decision. You have a voice. You're using it right now." Scarlett stood up from the table so abruptly the chair nearly toppled over. "This is medieval. We're in 2024, not 1824. "Oh, please," Vivian rolled her eyes. "You've been trying to find a suitable husband for 3 years. Remember Daniel, who thought investments were Pokemon cards? Or Marcus, who lived with his mother at 32? They weren't that bad. Marcus brought his mother on the date, Scarlett, to a romantic dinner. She ordered the most expensive dish on the menu." Scarlett opened her mouth to protest, but couldn't argue against the facts. Her last relationships had been, diplomatically speaking, disasters worthy of a documentary. "And besides," Vivian continued, taking advantage of her daughter's hesitation, "Alexander is handsome, rich, intelligent, and has a reputation for eating people alive at breakfast." "Nonsense, he's just business-focused." "Focused? Mother, the man fired 300 employees via email on Christmas Eve and saved the company from bankruptcy. See? Pragmatic." Scarlett began pacing back and forth in the kitchen, her slippers making an annoying noise against the marble floor. "I can't believe I'm having this conversation. When was all this decided?" "Last night. His father called your father. They talked, reached an agreement." "An agreement? Like I'm cattle." "Very expensive cattle," Vivian murmured, then quickly corrected herself upon seeing her daughter's murderous look. "I mean, you're too precious to be compared to anything." Scarlett's father, Harold Pemberton, chose this moment to enter the kitchen, already dressed in his impeccable suit and carrying a coffee cup that probably cost more than minimum wage. "Good morning, flowers of my life," he said, kissing both their foreheads. "From the noise, I imagine your mother has shared the good news." "Daddy," Scarlett grabbed his arm like an anchor, "please tell me this is an elaborate prank." Harold sighed, which was never a good sign. "Princess, I know it's a lot of information at once, but the company is going through some difficulties. Nothing we can't resolve, but a strategic alliance with the Blackwoods would be beneficial." "Beneficial for whom? Certainly not for me. For the whole family. And Scarlett, you need to get married sometime." "Why not to someone who can offer stability?" "Because I don't love him? Because I barely know him? Because he probably sees me as a corporate acquisition? Love can grow, Vivian said hopefully. Look at me and your father. At first I thought he was a pompous bore. I was a pompous bore, Harold admitted with a smile. And now you're a pompous bore that I love, Vivian completed, giving him a little kiss on the cheek. Scarlett looked at them with a mixture of affection and exasperation. Her parents really loved each other, that was unquestionable. But they had met in college, dated for 5 years before marrying. When is the wedding? She asked, resigned. Saturday. Saturday? As in 4 days from now. The Blackwoods don't like to waste time, Harold explained. Alexander has an important business trip next week. Of course he does. I bet he'll treat the honeymoon like a Zoom conference. Actually, Vivian said, consulting some notes, there won't be a honeymoon. Alexander thinks it's a waste of time for relationships. How should we call this? Based on mutual convenience. Scarlett threw herself into the chair, defeated. Fantastic. I'm going to marry a heartless robot in 4 days, and I won't even have a proper honeymoon to cry about my life choices. Don't be dramatic, Harold said, but his voice had a gentle tone. Alexander is a serious businessman, but I'm sure you two will find common ground. Common ground between what? My personality and his non-existent one? Harold's phone rang at that moment, and he answered with his professional voice. Harold Pemberton. Ah, Alexander, good to hear from you. Scarlett froze. It was him. The man she would marry in 4 days was on the other end of the line, probably discussing the details of his latest acquisition, herself. Of course. Yes, she's eager to get to know you better. What? Dinner tonight? Perfect. 8 o'clock at Chateau Laurent. Excellent choice. Scarlett made desperate gestures to her father, shaking her head frantically, but Harold just smiled and continued the conversation. She'll be delighted. Talk to you later. Daddy, Scarlett said as soon as he hung up, did you just make a date for me without consulting me? Technically, he's your fiancé, and you two need to get to know each other a little before the wedding. A little? We're getting married in 4 days. Exactly why the date is important, Vivian said, already in organizer mode. We need to choose a dress, do your hair, maybe some makeup to highlight your eyes. Mother, I'm not going to a fashion show. It's dinner. With your future husband. First impressions are everything. Scarlett looked at her parents, who suddenly seemed more animated than she'd seen them in months. Reality began to sink in. This was really going to happen. In 4 days, she would be Scarlett Blackwood, wife of a man she'd never spoken to and who, by all evidence, had about as much interest in romance as a computer. All right, she said finally. I'll have dinner with Alexander Blackwood tonight. But if he's half the monster they say he is, the wedding is off, no matter how many deals it might ruin. That's the spirit, Vivian said, clapping her hands. That wasn't meant to be encouraging, Mother. But deep down, a small part of Scarlett was curious. Who was Alexander Blackwood really behind all that terrible reputation? And more importantly, was there any chance, however small, that her parents were right about this crazy decision? She looked at the clock. 8 in the morning. 12 hours to prepare to meet the man who would change her life forever. What could go wrong? They say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the first impression is so spectacularly wrong that you spend the next 3 years wondering if you're living in an alternate universe. But again, I'm jumping ahead. At exactly 7:47 p.m., Scarlett stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, wearing her third outfit choice of the evening. The black cocktail dress lay discarded on the bed next to the too casual sundress and the trying too hard red number that made her look like she was auditioning for a vampire movie. She'd finally settled on a navy blue dress that her mother declared sophisticated but approachable, whatever that meant. Her red hair was swept into an elegant updo that had taken her hairdresser 2 hours to perfect, and her makeup was what the beauty magazines called effortlessly natural, which, paradoxically, had taken 45 minutes to achieve. You look beautiful, darling, Vivian said from the doorway, holding a small velvet box. These were your grandmother's. Pearl earrings. Of course. Because nothing said, I'm ready to marry a stranger for business reasons, quite like family heirlooms. Mom, Scarlett said as she put on the earrings, what if he's horrible? What if he's one of those men who corrects the waiter's pronunciation and tips exactly 15%? Then you'll civilize him, Vivian said with more confidence than the situation warranted. The drive to Chateau Laurent took exactly 12 minutes. 12 minutes during which Scarlett's driver, Thomas, tried to make encouraging small talk while she practiced breathing exercises that weren't working at all. Chateau Laurent was the kind of restaurant that required reservations 3 months in advance and served portions so small they came with magnifying glasses. Okay, not really, but Scarlett was feeling dramatic. The maitre d' led her to a private corner table where a man sat with his back to her talking quietly into his phone. Even from behind, Alexander Blackwood was imposing. Broad shoulders filled out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, and his dark hair was styled with the kind of precision that spoke of expensive barbers and daily maintenance. When he turned around, Scarlett's breath caught. The gossip magazines hadn't lied about one thing. He was devastatingly handsome. Sharp jawline, piercing gray eyes, and the kind of classical features that belonged on Roman statues. Unfortunately, his expression had about the same warmth as those statues. Miss Pemberton, he said, standing and extending his hand. His voice was deep, controlled, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Alexander Blackwood. Scarlett, she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, businesslike, and lasted exactly the appropriate amount of time. No more, no less. He held out her chair with mechanical precision, then resumed his seat across from her. For a moment, they just looked at each other. It was like being evaluated by a very attractive computer. I took the liberty of ordering wine, Alexander said, gesturing to a bottle that probably cost more than most people's rent. I hope you don't mind. The 2018 Bordeaux pairs well with their signature dishes. That's thoughtful, Scarlett said, wondering if he'd calculated the optimal wine pairing or if this was his standard date protocol. I don't believe in wasting time on indecision, he replied, which somehow managed to make thoughtfulness sound like a business strategy. The waiter appeared as if summoned by magic, poured the wine, and disappeared. Alexander raised his glass. 2 hour arrangement, he said. 2 hour arrangement, Scarlett echoed, though the word left a bitter taste that had nothing to do with the wine. They ordered. Alexander chose the duck confit with scientific precision, while Scarlett went with the salmon, mostly because she was too nervous to process the French descriptions properly. So, Scarlett said, desperate to break the silence that was stretching like taffy. Tell me about yourself. What do you do when you're not acquiring companies and terrifying employees? Alexander's eyebrow twitched, the first sign of genuine human emotion she'd seen from him. I don't terrify employees. I maintain standards. Ah, yes, the Christmas Eve firing incident, very festive. The company was hemorrhaging money. Decisive action prevented a complete collapse that would have cost 3,000 jobs instead of 300. He said it so matter-of-factly that Scarlett almost believed he thought that made it better. Do you always think in numbers? She asked. Numbers don't lie. People do. Wow, that's either very wise or very sad. I haven't decided which. Alexander paused with his wine glass halfway to his lips, studying her face as if she were a particularly interesting acquisition report. You're not what I expected, he said finally. What did you expect? Someone who swoons over spreadsheets? Someone more compliant. Scarlett nearly choked on her wine. Compliant? Did my parents advertise me as a golden retriever? For the first time all evening, Alexander's mouth twitched upward. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was progress. Your father may have emphasized your agreeable nature. My father clearly doesn't remember my teenage years. I once staged a hunger strike because he wouldn't let me get my nose pierced. How long did it last? 4 hours. But in my defense, Mom made lasagna. This time, Alexander definitely almost smiled. The expression transformed his entire face, making him look less like a corporate overlord and more like a regular person who happened to be criminally attractive. Their food arrived, and they ate in relative silence for a few minutes. Scarlett found herself stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the man across from her with his reputation. He ate with the same precision he seemed to apply to everything else, but there was something almost lonely about it. "Can I ask you something?" Scarlett said suddenly. "You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Why did you agree to this? The marriage, I mean. You could have any woman you wanted." Alexander set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Any woman I wanted would want me for my money. At least with you, we're both clear about the terms. That's actually kind of depressing. It's realistic. Same thing sometimes." They finished dinner making stilted conversation about safe topics. The weather, mild for October. The restaurant, excellent as expected. Their mutual acquaintances, few and far between. When Alexander paid the check, refusing to let her even see the amount, Scarlett felt like she'd just completed a job interview rather than a dinner date. Outside the restaurant, they stood awkwardly beside the valet stand. "I'll have my driver take you home," Alexander said. "I have my own car, thank you." "Of course you do." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "Scarlett, I want you to know that I don't expect anything from this marriage beyond what we've agreed to. You'll have your own space, your own life. I won't interfere." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. There was something almost vulnerable in his expression, quickly masked but unmistakably there. "Alexander," she said softly, "are you as nervous about this as I am?" He straightened, his mask sliding back into place. "I don't get nervous. I plan for contingencies." "Is that what I am? A contingency?" "You're—" He struggled for words, which seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. "You're an unknown variable. I don't like unknown variables." "Well," Scarlett said, extending her hand again, "here's to making the best of unknown variables." He shook her hand, and this time his grip lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "Until Saturday, Miss Pemberton. Until Saturday, Mr. Blackwood." As Scarlett watched him walk away to his waiting car, a sleek black vehicle that looked like it could double as a spaceship, she realized something that should have terrified her. Alexander Blackwood wasn't the heartless robot she'd expected. He was something far more dangerous. He was human. And despite everything, the arranged marriage, the business deal, the complete lack of romance in their situation, she was actually curious to discover what kind of man hid behind all that careful control. Saturday suddenly seemed both too far away and much too soon. If someone ever tells you that planning a wedding in 3 days is impossible, they're lying. It's not impossible. It's just certifiably insane. What they don't mention is that somewhere between the third nervous breakdown and the great flower catastrophe of Friday afternoon, you might actually start to believe this crazy plan could work. Emphasis on might. Wednesday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a fire alarm. Scarlett woke up to find her mother standing over her bed holding a clipboard, 3 dress bags, and what appeared to be a small army of wedding planners. "Rise and shine, sleeping beauty," Vivian chirped with the enthusiasm of someone who'd clearly been up since dawn. "We have a wedding to plan." "Mom," Scarlett groaned, pulling a pillow over her head, "it's 6:30 in the morning." The early bird catches the perfect wedding dress. Now up, up, up! The next 6 hours were a blur of fabric swatches, flower samples, and increasingly frantic phone calls. Apparently, when you told vendors you needed a full wedding setup in 3 days, they either hung up on you or charged enough to fund a small country. "The Chateau Belmont is available for Saturday," announced Miranda, the wedding planner who'd been hired at an hourly rate that made Scarlett's teeth hurt. "It's a lovely venue, though a bit expensive on short notice." "How expensive?" Harold asked, though his expression suggested he was afraid to know. $50,000. Plus catering, flowers, music, and decoration. Vivian didn't even blink. Perfect. Book it. Scarlett nearly fell off her chair. $50,000? For one day? Darling, you only get married once, Vivian said, then paused. Well, hopefully. That's reassuring, Mother. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you're surviving the wedding preparations. A. Blackwood. Scarlett stared at the message. Alexander had texted her. The man who probably had his assistant schedule his breathing had actually sent her a personal text. She typed back, "Define surviving. Are hallucinations from flower-induced stress normal?" His response came surprisingly quickly. Only if they involve profit margins. Are you at the dress fitting? About to be. How did you know? Your mother called my assistant to coordinate schedules. She's thorough. That's one word for it. Try terrifying. Good luck with the dress. Scarlett found herself smiling at her phone, which felt ridiculous considering the circumstances. Who's making you smile like that? Asked her best friend Emma, who'd arrived with reinforcements in the form of coffee and donuts. No one, Scarlett said quickly, shoving her phone in her bag. Aha, it's him, isn't it? The mysterious Mr. Blackwood. He just texted about the wedding preparations. He texted you? Emma's eyes widened. Scarlett, that man doesn't text. According to Fortune magazine, he communicates exclusively through formal emails and intimidating stares. Well, he's texting now. This is progress. What did he say? That my mother is terrifying. Emma burst out laughing. I like him already. The dress fitting at Madame Celeste's boutique was an experience that could only be described as aggressively French. Madame Celeste herself was a tiny woman with silver hair and the kind of accent that made everything sound like a declaration of war. Ah, the bride, she exclaimed, sizing up Scarlett with the intensity of a general planning a siege. We have very little time, but I have the perfect dress. Come, come. The dress was indeed perfect, flowing ivory silk with delicate lace detail that managed to be both elegant and understated. When Scarlett looked at herself in the mirror, she actually looked like a real bride, not someone being sold to the highest bidder. It's beautiful, she breathed. Of course it is beautiful, Madame Celeste declared. I do not make ugly dresses. That would be an insult to the universe. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Alexander. How's the dress shopping going? Without thinking, she replied, Found the perfect one. Very princess-like, which is ironic since I feel more like I'm being traded to form a political alliance. Medieval princesses usually got better deals. At least they got horses. Scarlett snorted with laughter, causing Madame Celeste to give her a sharp look. Are you saying I should negotiate for livestock? I'm saying you should negotiate for whatever makes you happy. The message made her pause. There was something unexpectedly thoughtful about it. What would make you happy, Alexander? This time, his response took longer. I'm still figuring that out. Scarlett! Vivian's voice cut through her phone trance. We need to go look at flowers. The flower shop was a chaos of colors and scents that made Scarlett's allergies kick in immediately. The florist, an enthusiastic man named Peter who spoke in superlatives, showed them approximately 7,000 different options. These white roses are absolutely divine with baby's breath. Or perhaps these lilies, so elegant, so sophisticated. Oh, but these peonies, breathtaking. After an hour of increasingly dramatic flower descriptions, Scarlett's head was spinning. I need air, she announced, stepping outside the shop. Her phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen. Hello, she answered, surprised. You sound overwhelmed, he said without preamble. How can you tell that from one word? Experience. I spend a lot of time listening to overwhelmed people. Right, the corporate overlord thing. Among other things. There was a pause. Would you like me to handle the flowers? You want to pick my wedding flowers? I want to solve a problem that's causing you stress. It's what I do. Alexander, you don't know anything about flowers. I know about negotiations and vendors. Leave it to me. But what if you choose something terrible? What if you pick black roses or something equally ominous? Do you trust me? The question hung in the air between them. Did she trust him? She barely knew him. I'll trust you, she said finally. But if I end up with a bouquet of poison ivy, we're going to have words. Noted. I'll text you pictures before making any final decisions. Why are you being so helpful? Because this is happening whether we like it or not. We might as well make it tolerable. After he hung up, Scarlett stood outside the flower shop feeling oddly lighter. When she went back inside, she announced that the flowers were handled. Handled how? Vivian demanded. Alexander is taking care of it. The groom is choosing the flowers? Peter looked scandalized. But that is most irregular. Peter, Scarlett said with more confidence than she felt. I have a feeling this whole marriage is going to be irregular. Thursday passed in a blur of final fittings, menu tastings, and last-minute crises. Friday morning brought the promised flower photos from Alexander, elegant white roses mixed with eucalyptus and just a touch of lavender. They were perfect. Somehow, he'd managed to choose exactly what she would have picked herself. She texted back, "They're beautiful. How did you know?" Lucky guess. Plus, I may have asked Emma what you like. You called Emma? I called her office. Professional consultation. About flowers? About you. The simple honesty of it made her heart skip in a way that felt dangerous. Friday afternoon brought the rehearsal at Chateau Belmont, which was gorgeous enough to make Scarlett temporarily forget this wasn't a real wedding. Alexander arrived precisely on time, looking devastating in a dark suit, and appearing significantly more relaxed than he had at dinner. Miss Pemberton, he said formally. But there was warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Mr. Blackwood, she replied, fighting a smile. The rehearsal went smoothly, if you ignored her cousin Jake's inappropriate jokes and her Aunt Margaret's loud commentary about young people these days. Alexander handled it all with surprising grace, even when Uncle Bob tried to give him investment advice. Afterward, as the families mingled over cocktails, Alexander appeared at her elbow. Nervous? He asked quietly. Terrified, she admitted. You? Same. He paused, then added, But I'm beginning to think this might not be the disaster I expected. High praise from you. Don't let it go to your head. As Scarlett looked around at the beautiful venue, the perfect flowers, and her family laughing with his, she felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this crazy plan might actually work. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Alexander Blackwood. The question was, who would she be when she did? There's something profoundly surreal about getting married to someone you've known for exactly 4 days. What's even more surreal is discovering, somewhere between I do and the first dance, that you might actually want this to be real. But that realization would come later, along with the cake incident and the discovery that my new husband could actually smile without his face cracking. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable sunshine and Scarlett's mother vibrating at a frequency that could probably power small appliances. "It's your wedding day!" Vivian shrieked, bursting into Scarlett's room at 7 a.m. sharp, followed by what appeared to be a small army of hair and makeup professionals. "Good morning to you too, Mom," Scarlett mumbled, eyeing the coffee cup in her mother's hand with desperate longing. "No coffee!" declared Sasha, the makeup artist, snatching the cup away. "Caffeine makes you jittery, and jittery brides get mascara smudges." "But without coffee, I'm essentially a zombie," Scarlett protested. "Zombies don't get married at Chateau Belmont," Vivian said firmly. "Now sit still and let Sasha work her magic." 3 hours later, Scarlett looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her red hair was styled in an elegant updo with soft tendrils framing her face. Her makeup was flawless, and the dress fit like it had been designed specifically for her body. "Wow," breathed Emma, who had been documenting the entire transformation process with her phone. "Scarlett, you look incredible." "I look like a real bride," Scarlett said, surprised by how much the thought pleased her. "That's because you are a real bride," Vivian said, getting teary-eyed. "My baby girl." "Mom, don't cry. You'll ruin your makeup." Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "How are you feeling?" She typed back, "Like I'm about to marry someone I barely know for reasons that made sense 4 days ago but seem insane now. Cold feet? Frozen solid. You? Same. But I keep thinking about what you said. Making the best of unknown variables. Did the great Alexander Blackwood just admit to being nervous? I admitted to having frozen feet. There's a difference." Despite everything, Scarlett found herself smiling at her phone. "See you at the altar, unknown variable. See you there, contingency plan." The drive to Chateau Belmont took 20 minutes, during which Vivian gave Scarlett approximately 73 pieces of contradictory advice about marriage, ranging from "always let him think he's right" to "never back down from an argument." "Mom," Scarlett said finally, "you're not helping." "Sorry, darling. This is happening so fast." "Tell me about it." Chateau Belmont looked like something from a fairy tale, with its ivy-covered walls and perfectly manicured gardens. The ceremony was set up in the main ballroom, which had been transformed with Alexander's flower choices. Scarlett had to admit the man had excellent taste. Emma squeezed her hand as they arrived. "Ready?" "No," Scarlett said honestly. "But let's do this anyway." The processional music began, and suddenly Scarlett was walking down the aisle on her father's arm, trying not to trip over her dress or hyperventilate. The guests, a mixture of both families and what appeared to be half of high society, rose to their feet. But none of that mattered when she saw Alexander waiting at the altar. He looked magnificent. His black tuxedo was perfectly tailored, his hair was styled to perfection, and for once his expression wasn't entirely unreadable. When their eyes met, he actually smiled, not his usual barely there twitch, but a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Scarlett felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with wedding nerves. "Breathe," her father whispered as they reached the altar. "Who gives this woman to be married?" asked the officiant. "Her mother and I do," Harold said, kissing Scarlett's cheek before placing her hand in Alexander's. Alexander's hand was warm and steady, which was more than could be said for hers. "You look beautiful," he murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she whispered back. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows. They'd decided against writing their own, which seemed like false advertising under the circumstances. But when Alexander said "I do," looking directly into her eyes, Scarlett felt something shift inside her chest. "I do," she heard herself say, and meant it more than she'd expected to. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander kissed her softly, briefly, but with something that felt almost like tenderness. The reception was a blur of congratulations from people she'd never met, dinner courses that she was too nervous to taste properly, and speeches that ranged from touching, her father, to mortifying, Alexander's college roommate, who apparently had many stories about Alexander's efficiency in all aspects of life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the band leader announced, "it's time for the first dance." Scarlett and Alexander took the floor to "At Last" by Etta James, a song choice that felt both ironic and oddly appropriate. "I should warn you," Alexander said as he took her in his arms. "I'm not much of a dancer." "I should warn you," Scarlett replied, "that I took ballroom dancing lessons until I was 16. Show off." They swayed together, and Scarlett was surprised by how natural it felt to be in his arms. He was actually a decent dancer, despite his protestations. "So," she said, "how does it feel to be married?" "Surprisingly, normal," Alexander said, considering. "Though I keep expecting someone to jump out and tell us this was all an elaborate prank. My cousin Jake might actually do that. He's had a lot of champagne. I'll keep an eye on him." As the song continued, more couples joined them on the dance floor. Scarlett caught sight of her parents dancing nearby, looking at each other with the same love and warmth they'd had for 25 years. "Do you think they're right?" she asked suddenly. "My parents, I mean. About love growing over time?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think love was just a chemical reaction that people used to justify poor decision-making." "Used to?" "I'm reconsidering some of my theories." Alexander Blackwood admitting he might be wrong. This truly is a day of miracles. Don't get used to it. But his smile took the sting out of the words. The evening progressed smoothly until the cake cutting, when disaster struck in the form of Alexander's 7-year-old nephew Timothy, who had somehow consumed enough sugar to power a small rocket. "Uncle Alex! Uncle Alex!" Timothy shrieked, launching himself at Alexander with the force of a cannonball. Alexander, caught off guard while holding a knife covered in wedding cake, stumbled backward. The knife went flying, the cake went sideways, and somehow Scarlett ended up with a face full of vanilla buttercream. For a moment, the entire ballroom was silent. Then Alexander started laughing. Not his careful, controlled smile, but genuine, delighted laughter that made him look 10 years younger. "I'm so sorry," he said, reaching out to wipe frosting from her cheek. "Timothy, you owe your new aunt a very big apology." "Sorry, Aunt Scarlett," Timothy said cheerfully, apparently unbothered by the chaos he'd caused. "It's okay," Scarlett said, starting to laugh too, "though I think I need a new face." Alexander gently cleaned the frosting from her face with his napkin, his touch surprisingly tender. "There," he said softly. "Perfect." For a moment, they just looked at each other, and Scarlett felt that dangerous skip in her heartbeat again. "Well," she said finally, "at least we'll have interesting wedding photos." "The cake was probably overrated anyway," Alexander replied, spoken like a true husband, always practical. "I'm learning." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Scarlett found herself standing beside Alexander, still in their wedding attire, watching their families say goodbye. "So," Alexander said quietly, "what happens now?" "Now we go home," Scarlett said, then paused. "Our home, I guess." "Are you ready for that?" Scarlett looked at this man who was now her husband, who had chosen perfect flowers and laughed at cake disasters and danced with her like she mattered. "Ask me tomorrow," she said. But secretly, she was beginning to think the answer might be yes. Nothing quite prepares you for the moment when you realize you're standing in a stranger's house wearing a wedding dress, legally bound to someone whose favorite color you don't even know. What's worse is when that same stranger offers you his shirt, and suddenly you're wondering if maybe you'd like to find out a lot more about him than just his favorite color. The Blackwood mansion was exactly what Scarlett had expected from a billionaire's home. Imposing, elegant, and roughly the size of a small country. What she hadn't expected was how quiet it would be, or how the silence would make her hyper-aware of every breath, every footstep, every rustle of her wedding dress. "Welcome home," Alexander said as they stood in the marble foyer, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Home," Scarlett repeated, testing the word. It felt foreign on her tongue. They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to do next. The day had been so carefully orchestrated that now, faced with unscripted time, they were both at a loss. "Would you like a tour?" Alexander offered. "That would be nice." He led her through rooms that looked like they belonged in architectural magazines. The library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the living room with its massive fireplace, the dining room that could seat 20. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and somehow cold. "This is your room," Alexander said, stopping at a door on the second floor. "I had your things moved in this afternoon." Scarlett's room was lovely, decorated in soft blues and creams, with a sitting area by the window and a bathroom that was larger than her entire apartment had been. Her clothes were already hung in the walk-in closet, looking lost in the enormous space. "It's beautiful," she said, because it was. "Where's your room?" "Down the hall. Far enough for privacy, close enough for convenience." The word hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. "Alexander," Scarlett said, sitting on the edge of the bed, "we should probably talk about expectations." Expectations? You know, married people things. Like, do we eat breakfast together? Do we have dinner together? Do we pretend to be a couple when other people are around? Alexander leaned against the doorframe, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. "I honestly haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "I've been so focused on getting through the wedding that I forgot there's an after." "Same here." Scarlett kicked off her heels, sighing in relief. "These shoes are instruments of torture. You can take off more than just the shoes, you know. This is your home now." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. He was trying to be considerate, she realized, in his own awkward way. "I don't suppose you have something I could borrow?" she asked. "This dress is gorgeous, but it's not exactly loungewear." "Of course." He disappeared for a moment and returned with a white button-down shirt and a pair of sweatpants. "These might be a bit big." "Perfect. I'll just—" She gestured toward the bathroom. "I'll wait downstairs. Take your time." 20 minutes later, Scarlett found Alexander in the kitchen, still in his tuxedo pants but having traded his jacket and tie for a simple black t-shirt. He looked younger, more approachable, more human. "Better?" he asked, looking up from where he was making what appeared to be tea. "Much." The shirt fell to her mid-thighs, and the sweatpants had to be rolled up several times, but she felt infinitely more comfortable. "Tea? I thought we might need something calming. Today was—" He paused, searching for words. "Overwhelming? That's one word for it." He handed her a mug, and their fingers brushed briefly. Scarlett felt that same little electric shock she'd been experiencing all day whenever he touched her. "So," she said, settling onto one of the kitchen stools, "tell me something about yourself that I don't know." "Like what?" "Anything. Favorite food, biggest fear, secret talent. We're married now. I should probably know more about you than your net worth and your reputation for corporate ruthlessness." Alexander leaned against the counter, considering. "I can't cook," he said finally. "At all? I once burned water trying to make pasta." Scarlett laughed. "How do you burn water?" "Forgot it was on the stove. Came back 2 hours later to find the pot completely dry and smoking." "That's actually impressive in a terrifying way. What about you? Secret talents?" "I can juggle." "Seriously? 3 bowls, 2 oranges, or 1 very patient cat, though I don't recommend the cat option." "I'll keep that in mind." Alexander's mouth twitched upward. "Anything else?" "I'm addicted to terrible reality TV. The worse it is, the more I love it." Define terrible. "Shows where people marry strangers after knowing them for 30 seconds. They both froze as the irony hit them. "Well," Alexander said slowly, "at least we had 4 days. 4 whole days. We're practically experts at this marriage thing." They dissolved into laughter. Real, genuine laughter that felt surprisingly natural. "Alexander," Scarlett said when they'd calmed down, "can I ask you something personal? More personal than admitting I can't cook? Why haven't you ever been married? I mean, really married. For love or whatever." His expression grew serious. "Honestly, I never saw the point. My parents had what people called a good marriage, but it was really just a successful business partnership. They respected each other, but I never saw them connect. Not the way your parents do." "And you didn't want that?" "I didn't think I was capable of that." He paused. "I'm still not sure I am." There was something vulnerable in his admission that made Scarlett's chest tighten. "What changed your mind? About this marriage, I mean." "I met you." The simple honesty of it caught her off guard. "Alexander, I know this isn't what either of us planned," he continued. "But today, watching you laugh when Timothy destroyed the cake, seeing you dance with my grandfather even though he stepped on your feet 3 times, I realized that maybe I've been wrong about a lot of things." "Like what?" "Like thinking that caring about someone is a weakness, Like believing that love is just chemistry. He met her eyes. Like assuming that I could never be the kind of man someone could actually love. Scarlett's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. This wasn't the cold, calculating businessman she'd expected to marry. This was someone entirely different, someone real and uncertain and surprisingly sweet. "Alexander," she said softly, "I think you might be full of surprises. Is that good or bad?" "I'm still figuring that out." They talked until after midnight, sharing stories about their childhoods, their fears, their embarrassing moments. Alexander told her about the time he'd gotten stage fright during a high school presentation and fainted in front of the entire class. Scarlett confessed to once getting so nervous on a first date that she'd accidentally called the guy by her ex-boyfriend's name 3 times. "We should probably get some sleep," Alexander said eventually, noting the time. "Probably." But neither of them moved. "Scarlett," he said, his voice quieter now, "I want you to know that you don't have to. That is, there's no pressure for this to be anything more than what we agreed to." "And what did we agree to exactly?" "I'm not entirely sure anymore." She smiled. "That makes 2 of us." As they headed upstairs, Alexander stopped at her door. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For giving this a chance. For being you. Thank you for being better than advertised. Good night, Mrs. Blackwood." "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." As Scarlett closed her bedroom door, she realized something that should have terrified her. She was actually looking forward to tomorrow. For the first time in 4 days, being married to Alexander Blackwood felt less like a business arrangement and more like a possibility. They say the first fight in a marriage sets the tone for everything that follows. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the fight isn't about dishes or money, or whose turn it is to take out the trash. Sometimes it's about realizing that you're falling for someone who might not be falling back, and that terrifies you more than any corporate merger ever could. Scarlett woke up to the smell of something burning and what sounded like creative cursing coming from downstairs. Glancing at the clock, she saw it was barely 7 a.m. She pulled on Alexander's shirt from the night before and padded downstairs in bare feet. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Alexander stood at the stove, hair disheveled, still in yesterday's dress shirt, wielding a spatula like a weapon against what appeared to be the world's most stubborn pancakes. "Need help?" she offered, trying not to laugh. Alexander turned, looking harried and embarrassed. "I thought I'd try to make breakfast." Emphasis on try. "You really weren't kidding about the cooking thing, were you? The pancakes are apparently plotting against me." Scarlett moved to the stove, gently taking the spatula from his hands. Their fingers brushed, and she felt that familiar little spark. "The trick," she said, flipping the pancake perfectly, "is patience. You can't rush them." "I'm not very good at patience. I've noticed." They worked together in comfortable silence, Scarlett rescuing breakfast while Alexander made coffee, which, thankfully, he seemed capable of without causing property damage. "So," Scarlett said as they sat down to eat, "what's the plan for today? First full day of married life and all." "I have some calls to make," Alexander said, then caught himself. "But they can wait. What would you like to do?" "Honestly, I'd like to know more about my new husband. Yesterday we covered the basics, but I still feel like I'm living with a very attractive stranger. What do you want to know? Show me something that matters to you." Alexander considered this, then stood. "Follow me." He led her to a room she hadn't seen during the tour, a smaller, more personal space filled with bookshelves, a comfortable reading chair, and a desk covered with what looked like architectural drawings. "This is where I actually work when I'm at home," he said. "Not the formal office downstairs." Scarlett examined the drawings. "What's this project?" "Low-income housing development. Not exactly profitable, but—" He shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "But you're doing it anyway?" "Someone should." "Alexander Blackwood? Secret philanthropist?" "Hardly secret. Just not something I advertise." She studied him carefully. "You're not what people think you are you? What do people think I am? A heartless corporate shark who probably has ice water in his veins. And what do you think I am?" Scarlett moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "I think you're someone who pretends not to care because caring hurt you before." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a crack in his carefully maintained facade. "Scarlett." His phone rang, breaking the moment. He glanced at it and frowned. "I have to take this. It's Tokyo." "Of course it is." 5 minutes, he promised. 20 minutes later, Scarlett was still waiting. She could hear Alexander's voice from the formal office, growing more clipped and businesslike with each passing minute. When he finally returned, the warm, uncertain man from this morning had been replaced by the CEO she'd first met. "Sorry," he said curtly. "Crisis at the Singapore facility." "Naturally. I need to fly out tonight." "Tonight?" Scarlett felt something cold settle in her stomach. "We just got married yesterday. This is a $40 million deal, Scarlett. I can't just ignore it. And I can't just ignore that my husband of one day is abandoning me for a business trip. I'm not abandoning you. This is my job. Your job seems to be your everything." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Some of us have responsibilities that extend beyond our personal comfort." "Wow." Scarlett stepped back as if he'd slapped her. "That was unnecessarily cruel. I'm being realistic. This is what I do, Scarlett. This is who I am." "No, it's not. The man who made terrible pancakes this morning and showed me his housing project. That's who you are. This?" She gestured at his cold demeanor. "This is just armor. Maybe the armor is more honest than the man underneath. Or maybe you're just scared." "Of what?" "Of this actually working." They stared at each other across the room, and Scarlett could see the exact moment Alexander shut down completely. "I'll be back in a week," he said, his voice flat. "Mrs. Chen will take care of anything you need." "Mrs. Chen?" "The housekeeper." "Right. Because heaven forbid you actually take care of your wife yourself." Alexander's expression didn't change. "The car will take you wherever you want to go. The accounts are set up in your name. You'll have everything you need. Except a husband. Except a husband who's pretending to be something he's not." After he left, Scarlett stood in the kitchen surrounded by the remnants of their breakfast and felt the crushing weight of realization. She'd been falling for him, really falling, and he'd just made it clear that everything she thought was developing between them was one-sided. Her phone buzzed. "Emma. How's married life, Mrs. Blackwood?" "Terrible," Scarlett said, and burst into tears. An hour later, Emma arrived with ice cream, wine, and a determination to either fix the situation or help Scarlett plot Alexander's demise. "He's an idiot," Emma declared after hearing the whole story. "Maybe I'm the idiot for thinking this could be real." "No, you're the idiot for giving up after one fight." "Emma, he basically told me I don't matter." "He told you he's scared. There's a difference. Since when are you defending him?" "Since I saw the way he looked at you during the wedding." "Scarlett, that man is completely gone for you. He's just too stupid and stubborn to admit it." "Then why did he leave?" "Because he's a man, and men are idiots when they're scared." "That's not very reassuring." "It's not supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be motivating." "Motivating to do what?" "To fight for him." "Emma, I can't force someone to love me." "You're not forcing anything. You're showing him what he's walking away from." That evening, Scarlett sat in the enormous house that was supposed to be her home, wearing Alexander's shirt and wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The rational part of her brain said to cut her losses, get an annulment, go back to her old life, pretend this whole week had been a bizarre dream. But the other part, the part that had seen Alexander's vulnerability and humor and kindness, wasn't ready to give up. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown international number. "Flight delayed. Should be there by morning. Sorry about today." She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "We need to talk when you get home." "I know. Really talk, Alexander. Not just you shutting down when things get real." The response took longer. "I'm not very good at real." "Then you better learn fast, because I'm not going anywhere." "Why?" Scarlett took a deep breath and typed the words that terrified her. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and I'd like to see if you might fall back." Her phone stayed silent for so long, she thought he wasn't going to respond. Then, "I think I might already have." Scarlett stared at the message, her heart pounding. Tomorrow they would have to figure out how to build something real from the fragments of their arranged marriage. But tonight, for the first time since she'd agreed to marry Alexander Blackwood, she felt like they might actually have a chance. The question was, would he let them take it? There's a moment in every love story where everything hangs in the balance, where one conversation, one choice, one leap of faith determines whether you get a happily ever after or just a really expensive lesson in heartbreak. What I didn't expect was that our moment would happen in an airport at 6 in the morning, with him looking like he hadn't slept in a week and me wearing pajamas and yesterday's makeup. At 5:47 a.m., Scarlett sat in her car outside the private terminal at LAX, questioning every life choice that had led her to this moment. Emma's voice echoed in her head. "If you don't fight for this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." So here she was, about to ambush her husband of 3 days at an airport, wearing pajama pants and one of his sweaters, armed with nothing but coffee and the kind of desperate courage that only comes from having nothing left to lose. Alexander's plane had landed 20 minutes ago. She knew because she'd called his assistant and pretended to be confirming his schedule. Technically, that was probably stalking, but technically they were married, so maybe it counted as caring. When Alexander emerged from the terminal, pulling his carry-on behind him, he looked exhausted. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he'd slept about as much as she had. He stopped dead when he saw her leaning against her car. "Scarlett, what are you doing here?" "Waiting for my husband." "At 6 in the morning?" "You said we needed to talk. I figured sooner was better than later." Alexander looked around the empty parking area, then back at her. "How did you know what flight I was on?" "I have my ways." "You called Jennifer, didn't you?" "Your assistant is very helpful when she thinks it's romantic." Despite everything, Alexander's mouth twitched slightly. "She's a hopeless romantic." "Lucky for me." They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. In the early morning light, without his usual armor of expensive suits and corporate confidence, Alexander looked younger, more vulnerable. "I brought coffee," Scarlett said, holding up a cup. "Your usual. Black, no sugar, no mercy for your taste buds." "Thank you." He accepted the cup, their fingers brushing. "Scarlett, about yesterday." "Not here," she interrupted. "Get in the car." "I have a driver." "Alexander, get in the damn car." Something in her tone must have convinced him, because he loaded his luggage and folded his tall frame into her passenger seat without further argument. "Where are we going?" he asked as she started the engine. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption. No phones, no business calls, no excuses to run away." She drove to the beach, the same stretch of coast where she used to come as a child when her parents fought, where the sound of waves had always made her problems seem smaller and more manageable. "The beach?" Alexander said as they parked. "It's barely sunrise." "Perfect. No one else will be crazy enough to be here this early." They walked down to the sand in silence, both carrying their coffee. The ocean was gray-green in the pre-dawn light, with waves that crashed in a steady, hypnotic rhythm. "Okay," Scarlett said, stopping near the water's edge. "Ground rules. We're going to have an actual conversation. No corporate speak, no emotional walls, no running away when things get uncomfortable." "Scarlett, I'm not finished." She turned to face him fully. "I know this marriage started as a business arrangement. I know neither of us asked for this. But something real is happening between us, Alexander, and you know it." "Do I?" "Yes, and it terrifies you." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. My father once told me that caring about someone gives them the power to destroy you. And you believed him? I watched him prove it. My mother left when I was 12, just disappeared one day. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. He never got over it. Scarlett felt something twist in her chest. Alexander, I'm not your mother. How do I know that? Because I'm here. She gestured around them. I'm here at 6 in the morning, in my pajamas, at a beach, trying to save something that most people would have given up on already. Why? Because you're worth saving. Alexander turned to look at her then, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. The part of him that wanted to believe her fighting against years of carefully constructed defenses. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. I don't know how to be vulnerable, open, whatever this requires. You think I do? Alexander, I've never been married before either. I'm making this up as I go along. But you're brave enough to try. So are you. You married me, didn't you? That was business. Was it? Because the man who chose my flowers and danced with me and made terrible pancakes yesterday morning didn't feel like business to me. Alexander was quiet again, and Scarlett could see him struggling with something. I hurt you yesterday, he said finally. Yes, you did. I was scared. When I saw you looking at my housing project, when you said you thought I was someone who pretends not to care, it felt too real, too dangerous. So you decided to prove me wrong by actually not caring? Something like that. How did that work out for you? Alexander laughed, but it was a broken sound. Terribly. I spent the entire flight thinking about you, about us, about how I'd rather be making disaster pancakes with you than closing the biggest deal of my career. Scarlett's heart stuttered. Really? Really. He reached out, hesitantly, and touched her face. Scarlett, I meant what I said in that text. I think I am falling in love with you. Hell, I think I fell the moment you told your mother she was insane for arranging this marriage. That was 4 days ago. I'm a fast learner, but I don't trust myself not to hurt you again. I don't trust myself not to run when things get difficult. Scarlett caught his hand, pressing it against her cheek. Then don't run. Stay and fight. Stay and figure it out with me. What if I can't give you what you need? What if you can? What if we both can? Alexander stared at her for a long moment, and she could see the exact second he made his decision. The walls came down, the armor fell away, and suddenly he was just Alexander, uncertain and hopeful, and scared and brave all at once. Okay, he said softly. Okay, let's try. Let's see if we can build something real out of this insane situation. Are you sure? No, but I'm sure that I'd rather try and fail with you than succeed at anything without you. Scarlett felt tears sting her eyes. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Even though I'm terrified? Especially because you're terrified. It means this matters to you. Alexander cupped her face in both hands then, looking at her like she was something precious and fragile and worth protecting. It does matter to me. You matter to me. More than any deal, any merger, any amount of money. Alexander, I love you, Scarlett. I don't know how it happened so fast, but I do. I love your terrible reality TV shows and your juggling skills and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love you too, she whispered. Even when you're being a stubborn, emotionally constipated workaholic. Especially then? Especially then. When he kissed her, it was nothing like their careful wedding kiss. This was desperate and tender and full of promises they were both finally brave enough to make. When they broke apart, the sun had risen fully, painting the ocean in shades of gold and pink. So, Alexander said, his forehead resting against hers. "What happens now?" "Now we go home," Scarlett said, "and you teach me to make coffee while I teach you to make pancakes that don't require emergency services. And then we figure out how to be married, for real this time. I can live with that." "Good," Scarlett said, taking his hand. "Because you're stuck with me now, Mr. Blackwood." "Promise?" "I promise." As they walked back to the car, hand in hand, Scarlett realized that sometimes the best things in life really did come from the most impossible circumstances. All you had to do was be brave enough to fight for them. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be standing in my kitchen, covered in flour, arguing with my husband about the proper way to flip pancakes while our cat judges us from his perch on the counter, I would have suggested therapy. If you had told me I'd be deliriously happy about it, I would have suggested psychiatric evaluation. But here we are, and I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. "You're doing it wrong," Scarlett said, watching Alexander attempt to flip a pancake with the concentration of a surgeon performing brain surgery. "There is no wrong way to flip a pancake," Alexander replied, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "It's a simple mechanical process," says the man who once turned scrambled eggs into charcoal. "That was 6 months ago. I've evolved." The pancake went flying off the spatula, missed the pan entirely, and landed with a splat on the floor. Mr. Whiskers, their recently adopted cat, opened one judgmental eye and went back to sleep. "Very evolved," Scarlett said dryly. "I'm a work in progress. Good thing I like fixer-uppers." Alexander turned to face her, flour in his hair, and what appeared to be batter on his cheek, and Scarlett felt that same flutter in her chest that had been happening more and more frequently over the past year. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, pulling her into his arms despite the mess they were both covered in. "Happy anniversary, Mr. Blackwood." Their first anniversary had arrived with all the fanfare of a regular Tuesday, which was exactly how they'd wanted it. No fancy parties, no elaborate gestures, just them, terrible pancakes, and the comfortable chaos of a life they'd built together, one small moment at a time. "I have something for you," Alexander said, reaching into his pocket. "Alexander, we agreed no gifts." "This isn't a gift. It's more of a proposal." Scarlett's heart stopped. "A what now?" Alexander dropped to one knee in their flour-covered kitchen, pulling out a small velvet box, and Scarlett burst out laughing. "Are you proposing to your wife?" "I'm proposing to my wife properly," Alexander said, grinning up at her. "Because she deserves better than a business arrangement, even if that business arrangement turned out to be the best deal I ever made." Inside the box was a simple, elegant ring, nothing like the enormous diamond her mother would have chosen, and everything like what Scarlett would have picked for herself. "Scarlett Pemberton Blackwood," Alexander said, his voice suddenly serious. "Will you marry me? For real this time? For love and terrible pancakes and Mr. Whiskers' disapproval and everything that comes with a real marriage? Even the part where I watch terrible reality TV? Especially that part. I've become disturbingly invested in whether Chad finds true love with Brittany or Madison. It's going to be Madison. Brittany's just in it for the Instagram followers." See? You've taught me so much." Scarlett knelt down so they were eye level, framing his face with her hands. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, her right hand, since her left still wore the wedding band from their arranged marriage, and kissed her with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested their pancake breakfast might be delayed. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, even though you're about to burn our kitchen down." "What do you— oh God, the pancakes!" Epilogue. 3 years later. The Blackwood family portrait for their annual Christmas card was, as usual, a study in controlled chaos. "Sweetheart, stop trying to eat the bow," Scarlett said to 18-month-old James, who had inherited his father's stubborn streak and his mother's red hair, along with an apparent belief that all ribbon was edible. "He's fine," Alexander said, adjusting 2-year-old Elena, who was currently using his tie as a climbing rope. "It's organic ribbon. That doesn't make it food, Alexander. Everything is food if you're brave enough, piped up 5-year-old Timothy, Alexander's nephew, who was spending the holidays with them and had appointed himself the twins' life coach. That's terrible advice, Timothy, Scarlett laughed. Uncle Alex says you have to take risks in life. I meant calculated business risks, not eating Christmas decorations, Alexander protested. The photographer, a patient woman named Susan, who had clearly dealt with difficult families before, cleared her throat. Perhaps we could try one more time, just... Everyone look at the camera and smile. What followed was a series of photos that would later become family legend. James attempting to escape Scarlett's arms, Eleanor pulling Alexander's hair with delighted shrieks, Timothy making faces behind everyone's heads. And Mr. Whiskers, now an elderly cat with strong opinions about holiday festivities, walking directly through the shot with his tail held high in disdain. I think we got some good ones, Susan said diplomatically. Later, after the twins were napped and Timothy was building elaborate forts in the living room, Scarlett and Alexander sat in their favorite spot, the window seat in Alexander's study, which had become their study over the years. Do you ever think about how this all started? Scarlett asked, curled up against Alexander's side. You mean the part where our parents essentially sold you to me for business purposes? That's the one. I think about it every day, Alexander said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I think about how wrong I was about everything. About love, about marriage, about what makes life worth living. What makes life worth living, Mr. Blackwood? Terrible pancakes with my beautiful wife. Toddlers who think ties are rope. Cats who disapprove of everything. Reality TV shows that make no logical sense but somehow matter because they matter to you. That's a very different philosophy than you had 3 years ago. 3 years ago I thought happiness was a quarterly profit report. And now? Alexander turned to look at her, and Scarlett saw in his eyes the same wonder that had been there since their first real conversation. Now I know happiness is watching you teach our son to juggle, while our daughter tries to eat the juggling balls. He's going to be excellent at it. Elena's going to be excellent at eating inappropriate things. They get that from their mother. Hey, I have never eaten juggling balls. No, but you did eat that questionable sushi last week. It was an adventure. It was food poisoning. Same thing. Alexander laughed, pulling her closer. I love our life, Scarlett. I love our beautiful disaster of a family. I love that Timothy thinks Mr. Whiskers is his personal advisor. I love that you still watch shows about people getting married after 5 minutes and claim it's research. It is research. We're living proof that crazy romantic situations can work out. We're living proof that the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Speaking of unexpected, Scarlett smiled mysteriously, I have some news. Good news, or we need to renovate the house again? News. That depends on how you feel about cribs. Alexander went very still. Cribs. Plural. Apparently overachievement runs in both our families. Twins? Again? Twins again. Alexander stared at her for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed, the same genuine, delighted laugh that had made her fall in love with him all those years ago. Our families are going to be insufferable about this, he said. Completely insufferable. My mother's already planning the nursery themes. How does she know? You just told me. Alexander, I told Emma first. Emma told my mother. Basic information hierarchy. Right. I forgot about the Emma Vivian Intelligence Network. They're very efficient. Alexander cupped her face in his hands, looking at her with so much love it made her chest tight. Are you happy? He asked softly. Are you? I'm terrified and exhausted and covered in baby food most days, and I've never been happier in my life. Same here. Good, Alexander said, kissing her softly. Because I'm pretty sure this is just the beginning of our beautiful disaster. I wouldn't have it any other way. Outside, snow began to fall on the house that had once felt too big and cold, but now felt exactly the right size for their loud, messy, perfect family. And if you listened carefully, You could almost hear the sound of two people who had found love in the most unlikely place, still falling deeper every day.